Hey everybody, we are going to be working on our last project of this semester. So for this project, you're going to need some space in your kitchen. We are going to be making hanging ornaments or hanging sculptures. You're going to need to bake. So for those of you that need some assistance from your grown-ups, be sure to get that from them. And we're going to do the recipe right now. Okay, so we are going to be using a half a cup of flour. We need 2 tablespoons of salt, just regular table salt, something to stir with, a rolling pin, and if you have cookie cutters that you would like to use, this is my cookie cutter, or a butter knife or something else that you're going to be able to cut through the dough based on your design. So we want to think of what we want our final kind of hanging project to look like first. So we know what shapes to cut, or if you do have cookie cutters, that's great. Use those. Make your life easy. So we do a half cup of flour, just regular flour. It is 2 tablespoons of table salt. So 1, 2. And then we want to mix the dry ingredients together so that they kind of mix up nice and evenly. And then we need 2 tablespoons of warm water. When we take the water, we want to I do 1 tablespoon, kind of spread it out, and then mix it up some. What we should start getting is our dough should start clumping up. If you need to add more water to start to get it blended, go ahead and do so. Just do it slowly and 1 tablespoon at a time. We don't want to jump too much water in here. We want to keep this dough pretty dry. So we can see like this here, how this is starting to come together. This is great. So now this should give you enough to make, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 different objects, depending on the size of the shapes that you're going to be using and what you want your final design to be looking like. You can always scale this recipe up if you want to be making, if you want to make this stuff with your family, if you got, you know, younger siblings or older siblings, or just a whole bunch of bored people in the house and y'all want to make some hanging ornaments or hanging sculptures with these, you can do that. You can see now that it's starting to get a little bit more doughy. I'm just mixing it with my hands directly in the bowl. Okay, at this point, I want to try to get as much of that flour worked into the dough as I can. And I'm looking for this dough to be a pretty thick dough, but it should stretch. I'm going to add just a little bit more water, not even a full tablespoon. I don't know why it says warm water. I have no idea why. I just follow directions. So make sure that your water is on the warm side. I don't know if it just helps the salt dissolve better or helps with the mixing. I have no clue, folks. I teach ceramics, not baking, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. So here we go. So now my dough, yeah, is starting to get formed up. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put this down, get the rest of my flour down on here, and now we're gonna do what's called kneading. So kneading is where we just mix the dough with our hands to get it kind of a little bit more of a solid thing. So you can see how I'm pushing the dough out and I'm folding it back in and together. This is really similar to what we do with clay. Okay, so we can see here how it's now starting to look a little bit more like a bread dough, if you've ever baked bread, or kind of like a really dry and brittle cookie dough. And that's looking pretty good. So I have my dough here. I want to make sure that it's really sticking together and becoming like a solid piece. And then the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to roll it out using my rolling pin. So we want to get our, I almost said clay, but our dough about an 1/8 of an inch thickness. So I like to, whenever I roll it one direction, I pick it up and I flip it and I roll it the opposite direction. What that does is it helps us get a little bit more of a squared out shape, so we have more surface area to work with. And that's it. So now I have it about the thickness that I need it to be. So about an 1/8 of an inch thick. All right. So I'm going to be doing a design where I'm going to have a unicorn. So I'm going to use my cookie cutter. The only cookie cutters I have in my house are Star Wars or unicorns, so I decided to do the unicorn one. So I'm going to make one cutout, and then I'll turn it and find a space. This is if you guys have ever made like sugar cookies like this, kind of same idea, right? We need to make sure that we have enough space around to make that cut. I'm going to push that in. So these here, these can go over on my my cookie sheet. So you should have a cookie sheet that has either parchment paper or wax paper or something like that on it. I'll show you guys that step in a minute. I'm going to take this dough and I'm going to just knead it back together. So just kind of mash it back up. Again, this is just like how we would wedge in using ceramics. If we need to add a little bit more water, you can. If your dough is sticking a lot to the surface, you can put down just a thin layer of flour. So for my design, I'm going to be making unicorns hanging from rainbows. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, again, just roll out my dough. Keep my dough as even as I can. So again, every time I roll one direction, I pick it up and I flip it and move it the other direction. So I have this rolled out now. And I don't have a cookie cutter for the rainbow. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a pencil and draw in the shape that I want it to be. So I'm going to put two little clouds here. Like, here we go. And it doesn't need to be exact because we're going to be painting and coloring these in later. But I just want to kind of have an idea of what shapes I want to be cutting into my dough. So now I'm going to use my butter knife. And I'm going to very gently carve in to this as best I can. This is really similar, folks, to how we work with slabs when we're working with clay. Similar method. As I'm trying to cut this shape, I'm not trying to keep it all one line. I keep cutting away sections as I go. If you have an X-Acto knife or something like that for some of these more intricate shapes, you know, if you and your grown-ups feel comfortable and confident with you using a tool like that, feel free to. The dough is not difficult to cut through at all. It's just, you know, a butter knife, you can only get so much on the edging done. Okay, so that's gonna be my rainbow with my two little clouds on the end. Okay, so I can just kind of go through just like how I would if I'm working with clay and sort of clean up the edges that I cut. Make sure that they're nice and smooth. And you can sort of just reshape stuff very gently. We want to make sure that we don't have a lot of creases or that there's no overlaps or like cracks or anything like that on the surface of our biscuits or ornaments. Okay,